Springing ahead over the weekend and now springing into a load of news on a Monday morning. Elfrink Ray Flowers with you. It is Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by fantasyguru.com. Welcome in from the weekend. It was a pleasant one around these parts. A lot of sun, decent warmth. Of course, the time change kind of felt like spring a bit. You know, the sun was out a little later. Ray Flowers, it also feels like spring because the baseball news, it's hot and heavy. Even the football news is hot and heavy in the month of March. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, Kyle. Yeah, it's been a interesting time, has it not? We've got the NFL about ready to overwhelm Major League Baseball. I saw someone, I think it was Justin Mason, tweet out that what a wild world where the Cy Young winner is still unsigned and we're getting trades in fantasy football, But yeah, that's the world we're living in now, Kyle. And there's a lot going on from a sports perspective.
Yeah, it's a big week in the NFL. Free agency will begin, but already, there's been movement. Movement last night. Russell Wilson with a new home. Sounds like Kirk Cousins is going to play hardball with the Minnesota Vikings. So that and many other things coming your way on this Monday. Let's give you the rundown because, again, there's a load to get to. So we might as well just stop it with the junk that Kyle usually discusses and kind of get into what the show is supposed to be about. Man, we were with you last Friday and just, what is that? 70 hours, 72 hours, I guess it would be. Man, a lot has happened. Even on Friday, things were happening. Noelvi Marte, hotshot rookie with the Reds. Not going to see him for at least half the season, a PED suspension. Sounds like we're going to see Mookie Betts a lot at shortstop this season. Does that amp up the value at all? We will discuss. Today is the day for Edwin Diaz. Still being drafted as one of the top 3 or 4 relievers off the board, even though he missed all of last season. So we'll see how Diaz looks today for the Mets. And speaking of relievers, that is our topic today and this week on FSD. Today we will have the one big question, which, Ray, I think is a big one. Usually with these one big questions for a position, we focus on a player. But this is kind of focusing on the strategy. You and I will discuss how to build a bullpen, which everybody has a different way of going about things. And it's often league specific, but we'll give some tidbits coming up. And Ray, you and I guess, are fairly similar. Nobody's exact, but fairly similar with how we want to build a bullpen.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, a big part of this is, what style of league you're in, head-to-head, points, 5x5, 6x6, all that kind of stuff. Do you use sold or saved? Mm-hmm. How many active pitching slots you have each day, all these kind of things. And then ultimately the price you have to pay on draft day. So yeah, we'll get into it. But I would say, I think that's a fair statement. Generally speaking, we're more in alignment on this than we are in some other topics.
Speaking of relievers, our team preview, it takes a look at the Philadelphia Phillies, who I guess have a reliever, but nobody really seems interested in that reliever. Maybe it's because there's some uncertainty. That topic and many others coming up with the Phillies today. We will delve into the ever-growing, like literally every day it's growing, the Fantasy Guru Draft Guide. We profile a different article each and every day. Today, Ray is answering some big questions for 2024. And of course, we've got NFL news and notes. Let's go boom, boom, boom. Russell Wilson to Pittsburgh. Jerry Jeudy to Cleveland. Baker Mayfield back with Tampa. Mac Jones to Jacksonville. And that's not even all of it. There's more shaking in the NFL. So we'll get to all of that before we sign off a bit later today. Ray, hit him with the discount. Hit him with the coupon if you'd like.
I will, yeah. $19.99 for franchise mode, off-season mode, or football coverage right now at fantasyguru.com. You sign up, you get all the analysis of the trades, all the analysis of the signings, all the analysis leading up to the draft. That's franchise mode. Right now it's $19.99. Get signed up for that for football. We've got our all-in package, which includes hockey, basketball, college basketball, racing, MMA, PGA, soccer, all of that under one rubric. That's under all-in, the all-in package. And then, of course, we've got the baseball package. Good now to the World Series, the whole season. It's not just preseason, the whole season. Use the promo code FSD20, FSD20 to get a 20% discount off the already discounted price for fantasygurus.com's baseball products. Type it in there. Actually try the code and everything. You should be able to get hats from it, other products as well. And we might be announcing here on the show soon. Can't do it officially today, but soon I think we might have a partnership to break down here that will allow the folks to maybe interact with some of us on staff here to play some baseball, if you get my drift here. So look forward to that, announcing that here in the next couple days.
Love to hear that. Good stuff. Okay, Ray. I've got a pick coming up in my Tout Wars slow draft, which I will tell you, Todd Zola, who's kind of the commissioner of all these Tout Wars leagues, we were with an 8-hour clock, and Ray, he said the group was taking too long. He has now lowered it to a 4-hour clock.
Yes.
Now we're in the 31st round. We only got to finish 50. We got plenty of time.
But you said it slowed down appreciably, right?
But I'm not sitting here fretting. I mean, I've got 2.5 weeks till the season starts. We're going to get 19 rounds in. But we're down to a 4-hour clock.
Okay.
The pick is literally within the last 2 minutes, Ray, landed in my lap. I am looking for starting pitching.
Okay.
Because you'll love this, Ray. This is going to sound like a Ray Flowers moment on the show, but this is coming from Kyle Elfrink. Okay. Within this slow draft, Ray, I have drafted Sonny Gray and Lucas Giolito before their injuries.
Oh!
That's how slow this slow draft is moving.
In my keeper league, I took Noelvi Marte, and 2 days later was made a game suspension because of the stupid slow draft. So I feel your pain.
So I'm looking to back it now. I can go boring, which nobody likes. It's 31st round again. So so like the boring picks, Ray, would be Kyle Gibson, Wade Miley, maybe an Alex Cobb or a Kopech, just kind of these guys that when they're healthy, they're going to start every 5 days. And again, 2 of my top pitchers are injured. So I need to get some innings. Now, Ray, I could also aim high. Okay. And I'm seeing the name Cade Horton. And this is not a keeper or anything. I should probably throw in Bryce Elder too, maybe as a possibility, but I know his role with the Braves is kind of unsettled. But anyway, Cade Horton could be out there as kind of, I guess, the big get or the big search. That Yariel Rodriguez guy with Toronto, kind of looking at him too.
Right.
I don't know, Ray. Do I go safe or do I aim high with the 31st round?
Given that you lost a bunch of innings, right? Is it, like you said, Cal Gibson?
Yeah, it's just an innings. But here's what I've got in my pitching staff to give you an idea. So I got Giolito and Gray. They're going to be injured. Right. Kyle Harrison, Frankie Montas, Aaron Nola, Joe Ryan. These are starters. Clark Schmidt and Ranger Suarez. I've got a decent amount of innings, and I have drafted a lot of those guys already to kind of back up. But I know 3 of those other guys are going to get injured too, at some point this season. So I don't know. Maybe I should go risky with that selection. I've kind of got some stability now that I take a step.
Yeah, and it's late. Cade Horton's a good selection. He's obviously the top pitching prospect for the Cubs. For those people that don't know, he's got an opportunity to look at this pitching staff. Tyone's beat up already, and they're uncertain whether he's going to be there for opening day. They've got Amanga and Steele, of course. Kyle Hendricks, who's holding on, and then Jordan Wicks looks like the 5th starter. So
Wicks is out there. But I don't know if he's going to stick. He may get it on opening day, but it's like 3 starts, and if they're not good, he could be removed.
And that's kind of the issue. If Tyone goes down, if Hendricks goes down, and both Wicks and Horton are in the roster on the starting staff, you're in business. What if they're kind of basically fighting for the same job and you're trying to guesstimate?
Yeah.
That's the hard part there, Kyle.
I think I'm going Horton.
I think Horton to me would be the high end play. At that point, I think that Wicks is probably better to draft for most people, but you're talking about a 50 rounder and you got some injury issues. I think that's totally fair.
Well, the other part of this, and I think this is important to mention when we talk about like Jackson Jobe in Detroit, or Skeens even in Pittsburgh. Well, maybe not with Jobe. I don't know, but the Cubs to me are ready to contend. They're trying to win the NL Central, and maybe you can make the argument with Detroit and Pittsburgh. Obviously, is not waving the white flag now. But what I'm getting at, Ray, is like if the Cubs have a need for Horton, I think they'll turn him loose. I think they'll use him. I don't think there's going to be any service time games or, this guy, they're the Cubs. They got money. They can go out and sign guys. I always say this, if you're good, they'll keep you. And the Cubs are one of those teams. If you're good, they'll keep you. They'll find so I think I'm going to go Horton. That's going to be
all right. Pick made on air. Boo-boo.
Yeah, well, this will be the one that wins the league, right? There you go. Cade Horton. 22 starts, goes 11-2. Just dominance for Cade Horton. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about what you care about, namely your leagues, your draft. Because that's 11-2, right?
Okay.
Dream big. Come on. Weekend news roundup. Ray, you were just discussing Noel V. Marte. 80-game suspension, PED. Played about, 35, 40 games last year. Did pretty good in those. It looked like he was penciled in to start at third base. I told you, Ray, Jonathan India would find a way to get more playing time eventually. Not that this assures India of anything. But let's start with Marte before we go to the fallout. If you're in a redraft league, Ray, or I'm not drafting him now. 80 games, half a season. Who knows what's going on by the time we get to July? He probably goes to the minor leagues. Maybe one of these other hotshot youngsters is hitting and doing well. He could come back. He could be with the team, obviously, but has he got a starting gig like he would have a week ago? I don't think so. Again, you can't IL this guy. Most leagues, he'll have the NA. It's not like, it's really a dead bench spot. You're playing with one hand tied behind your back. For me, Ray, unless you're in, 35, 40 rounds, kind of those kind of drafts, I'm not drafting Marte.
Yeah, there are some very liberal IL setups across the land. If you can IL him, okay. Shouldn't be able to IL him. He should be an NA like Kyle's talking about. And if that's the case, no. I'll tell this. I'm in we draft 32 rounds each year. We have 5 keepers in my league I was talking about earlier, 32 rounds. Okay, so a little bit bigger rosters than most. I'm considering dropping him.
Wow.
And when the draft is over, because it's like, I'm not going to keep him. Barring a banana pants second half, I can't see it at this point, right? I took him in the 11th round. I'm not keeping him at that price point. Next year it'd be 10th round. I'm not doing that. So I'm considering just dropping him because it's going to be a totally wasted spot. We don't have IL spots in that league. We just added extra bench spots. So for me, if I'm dropping him in a keeper scenario, which I am, I think it's almost impossible for someone to hold him in a redraft scenario.
I'm kind of surprised you're making that decision in the keeper league, Ray.
Well, I'm lucky. I've got Bobby Miller and Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford. I've got some huge banger youngsters. So I don't have a need to take another guy. I've got Michael Harris as a young veteran I can keep. So my five-some is really good in terms of keepers. And I was shooting for the upside because, I ended up with – who'd I end up with at third base, my quarter infield? Matt Chapman. Woo! So it's like, I'm just keeping pace there. But, yeah, Marte, it's a dead spot. And I agree with you. I think in a redraft league, it's just not worth doing at this point.
And this now leads to the fallout. And this is where it becomes interesting, I think, for all leagues, Ray. Because they signed Candelario. What was that, January? It was pretty early in the process. And everybody wondered, why are you doing that? Maybe the Reds had inside info on this. I doubt it was because, there is, when the positive nature of a test first pops up, there is a little bit of going back and forth and figuring out, okay, was this all legit? That's over. There's no more back and forth. It's 80 games. He can't appeal this thing. Maybe the Reds would have known a month or two ago. I doubt it. But anyway, Candelario Ray could now move to third. That's kind of more of his natural position. They also have Christian Encarnacion Strand, who's another heavy-hitting dude. He can play at first base and third base. I mentioned India. He could probably handle third base just fine. So we'll have to see what the Reds do. They got a couple of weeks to figure this out, but I think certainly in the case of Encarnacion Strand, Ray, he's probably moving up boards because this really gets a name out of his way. And he is somebody who can rake. We have seen him rake in the minors. He hit very well last season. It's a lot of power. I don't know if the average is going to be there, but he is a guy who can hit and hit and hit. And so that's probably the most exciting pro with this news on Marte.
Yeah, he's kind of, at this point, probably a Rhys Hoskins, Salvador Perez type of clone. He's a guy that hit 255, 260, hit 25, 30 home runs. He's definitely got a legit power bat. It's certainly possible he hits 30 bombs this year with full-time work, and it does appear that he's going to get it now. And, you say it all the time, and you hinted at it there, that a lot of these teams are put together, and we kind of go, what the hell are they doing? And in the end, it ends up working out because people get hurt. People get suspended. CES, he goes up in the rankings, of course, because of this news. And then there's Jonathan India, who, I always got the sense that Jonathan India is getting 450 plate appearances anyway. You just get the sense that's the way it's going to be. And now it might be 550 because Marte is gone. And that makes him an intriguing guy because he could hit 15 to 20 home runs, steal 10 bases, gets on base at a good clip, depending upon where he hits in the order, could score a bunch of runs for this, potentially potent offense. So both those guys CES went up a little bit at first base because, again, there's kind of a glut of guys with that kind of skill set. India moved up substantially in the rankings at fantasyguru.com because I think it, again, opened up 100 plate appearances for him.
I'm trying to think. His eligibility, where is it? Is it second and third? Does he have that for
India?
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Going
India,
into
it's
the
only
season?
second base right now. He
Okay,
played
only
104
second
games
base.
there, 15 at DH last year.
Okay, so he's only got the second base,
Yeah.
but that'll come. So that's kind of the situation in Cincinnati. And we may get, as we look at lineups and how they develop, we may get a better read on who's going to be the guy and where they're going to hit and how they're going to handle this. It may end up just being still a lot of positional moving and matchups and lefty-righty kind of things. That could still be the case with the Reds. I bring up positional eligibility, Ray, because the other news we got on Friday is I guess the Dodgers have become convinced that Gavin Lux is not ready to go at the start of the season. So his career continues to just stall out. There's always something going on with Gavin Lux. And remember, that was an upper end prospect who, for a variety of reasons, it just hasn't clicked. Right now, it appears, I should say, that he's less than 100%. They've kind of worried about the throwing, maybe agility, just rustiness, I guess, overall with Gavin Lux. So, Ray, they've made I don't know if dramatic is the word, but it seems dramatic on the surface that Mookie Betts is going to be as it stands now, everyday shortstop. And he started making starts over the weekend at short. Now, we should note, he had outfield second base eligibility coming into the year, but he did start, I want to say, a dozen games at short last year. He appeared in 16. So depending on your league, you may already have shortstop eligibility. But for those who don't, Ray, you've now got a guy who's outfield second base and short, which sounds great and a big bonus. It's nice. I'm not saying it isn't, but I don't think it really adjusts. Like, he's in that group of, okay, he's not number one, but he could be anywhere from 2 to 6, competing against Julio Rodriguez, Bobby Witt Jr., and all these guys. Wherever I had or you had Mookie Betts ranked before this news, I don't know if it really changed.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we lost either. Kyle or I is frozen. I'm just going to talk to me. It's Kyle. Yeah, I think that in the case of Mookie Betts, all this does is solidify his spot as a star. And we already know that, as Kyle mentioned, 16 games played at shortstop is a scenario where in some leagues he was already qualifying there. If this moves him on to second or third on your board from fourth or fifth, totally fine with that. But it's not a scenario where all of a sudden, we all know who Mookie Betts is. And I think that the stability he brings offensively, the fact he's going to lead off for one of the best lineups in baseball, that run scored column that Kyle talks about all the time, dude just piles up runs year after year after year. And though he doesn't steal 30 bases like he once used to, Kyle, I mean, his offensive game is so stable, and the third position just locks him in, because I think we have the opposite effect early in the first round. Do you take his teammate Ohtani in the first round, whose numbers say yes, take him in the first round, but he locks you in at UT. In the case of Betts, you can draft him to say, all right, he's going to be my second baseman. Oh, okay, now I'm going to shift him to the outfield. Okay, my league only requires 5 games at shortstop. I'll just play him at middle infield until he qualifies at shortstop in week 2. So it just opens up the ability to build your team differently at the draft, and that's very attractive.
Yeah, so it's a development, probably more of a real life development. I guess the other question, Ray, is what's this mean at second base for the Dodgers? And they're kind of like the Reds now. It's not guys that are rookies or anything, but they got a lot of guys, Ray, that they could move to second, move to the outfield. I don't think Max Muncy is an option, but he's got second base in his background. He's maybe the third baseman. Chris Taylor is still there. They signed Kiki Hernandez about 2 weeks ago, so he's still there. Do you have a favorite at second base? I kind of think Chris Taylor he had a bad year, and he's never going to give you average, but he can do kind of the 10-10 or the 15-15 thing, which late in the draft is fairly attractive, and he can bounce all over your fantasy lineup as well.
I think they're still going to give Lux an opportunity. Okay. Now, does that pay off in anything usable? Nah. And you're right here. I mean, and they also have this option too. And so just to be clear, if you don't have a league that has Betts qualifying at shortstop, don't draft them with 100% expectations he's going to play shortstop, because there's always a chance they shift things up, because Miguel Rojas is a very good defensive shortstop. He doesn't hit very well. He's a very good defensive shortstop. They could end up with Betts at second base. So be cautious that you're not building your team around that idea if he doesn't already qualify there. You've got Hernandez and Taylor, who you mentioned, Kyle, can play infield and outfield, both of them second base eligible. So that I think they give Lux, if he's healthy, an opportunity. He's a lefty. Those other 2 guys are righties, so there might be mixing and matching there just because anyway. So I think that it's very reasonable to say at the end of the season that, all three of these guys end up within like 50 to 75 plate appearances of each other, right? And they all get kind of messy, and none of them are at 500. They're all in the 370 to 438 range or something like that. Taylor is the most attractive from a fantasy perspective because of the power speed mix and the flexibility. But as we've seen the last couple of years, the batting average is an issue for him at this point of his career.
I may have missed it over the weekend, so correct me, Ray, if I did. You mentioned Luck still with a shot at second. I was kind of working under the assumption that, there were maybe a couple of things working against him at shortstop. Maybe the arm was the big one. Have they said, hey, the arm's maybe not good enough for short, but we think he can still pull it off at second? Has that been? I didn't see that if it was mentioned over the weekend.
The reports that I saw suggested strongly that he would get an opportunity at second base. Okay. And that Dave Roberts basically said, we're making the switch. And what was the term he used? For now, or whatever the hell.
It's permanent for now. That's what he said.
There you go. There you go. So it's like, but yeah, I think Luck's at second base is, again, kind of where they're thinking this is going to go. And this is kind of their current plan, which could change immediately because they do have those two veterans that can play second base. And it also bears noting that the Dodgers, in opposition to so many other teams, I mean, look at their lineup. Ohtani's left-handed, Freeman's left-handed, Muncy's left-handed, Outman's lefth-handed, Hayward, if they use that in the outfield, and then Gavin Lux. They're heavily left-handed in the starting lineup if they're facing a righty. And then you go to the bench, and they got 4 righties on the bench. So they have this great mixture of lefties and righties at the infield and in the outfield that they can play the matchup game a lot, which is, again, even if Lux is the guy at second base, which is it's my concern, is he going to face any lefties? He may not face any lefties. It might be the two veterans, even if he's doing well against right-handed pitching.
Sort of sounds like that franchise knows what they're doing.
Maybe.
Yeah, sort of sounds like that. Other news going on in baseball, because there's a lot. Edwin Diaz probably set to make his debut for the Mets. At least that's the plan. He's being drafted pretty high. There was even a league Ray and I were covering, a experts league in auction, where Edwin Diaz was the most expensive reliever in that league. Now that was just but one auction, but I still don't understand it. Him going for more money than a Hader or than a Duran even. But he was all the way up at $22. Again, Ray, we'll talk about this when we jump into relievers. You and I usually don't get involved in that high-end game, the top 3, top 4 or 5 names. Is it important for Diaz to show something? I guess it is. I mean, it's been more than a year now since we've last seen him. Velocity might be kind of important, I think, to see from him in all these pitching appearances for the rest of the spring.
Yeah, it's been a year, and it was his knee. So, if he comes out and he's throwing 94 miles an hour, there's no reason he shouldn't be up with the velocity we're used to seeing from him. And, this is something we talked about. He's had 2 of the greatest relief seasons ever, right? He had the season of 57 saves, and he had the other season where he struck out 118 of 235 guys. He struck out half the batters he faced. He's dynamic potentially. Only has 1 season of 35 saves. And he's on a Mets team that, and he missed last season. I take him in the top 10 at relief pitcher, absolutely. Take him in the top 5. Okay. Taking him first or second, I agree with you. I just don't see that, especially when we haven't seen him out and showing us that he's the pitcher he was, 14 months ago this season.
And probably concerns are higher if it's an arm injury. You mentioned being a knee. But remember, so much of the push and velocity does come from the lower half of the body. So being able to trust that knee as you land, as you push off, that will be important. Now, he is not the only reliever we've got an eye on. Devin Williams over the week. And again, this always sounds worse, Ray, than maybe it is. At least that's how the Brewers are portraying it. But he is going to see a spine specialist. So, Ray, we'll just have to see. I guess the spine is causing a bit of an issue. This could be something like, when you're 60, you may have an issue. I don't know. We'll have to see. But the Brewers, they came out publicly and said this. And as of now, nobody's thinking, he'll begin the year on the IL. But we shall see.
Yeah, when you hear spine, doesn't that just say his back? Okay, his back. His spine. Ooh. It could be absolutely nothing, like you said, but we got to keep a close eye on this. And he's a really hard one. Like, do I drop him in the rankings at fantasyguru.com? Again, use that promo code FSD20 to sign up. I didn't. My finger was on the button to drop, and I was like, I'm gonna wait because I think I think most people know the story. This is not reliever 58 or anything like that. So don't reach for Devin Williams if you're doing a draft tonight. That'd be my advice. But at this point, I agree with you. I'm expecting it to be more of a nothing burger than a something burger.
Yeah, he's not the only Williams on the pitcher's mound that is dealing with things. Gavin Williams, who at this point might be the top pitcher to have with the Guardians, he experienced what the team is terming elbow tightness after doing some work with weighted balls. So, again, keep an eye on Gavin Williams. Edward Cabrera, hard thrower, shoulder tightness. Ray mentioned Jamison Talion, back injury. And the Cubs are already saying Talion's probably on the IL to begin the season. So, yes, we have reached that point in spring. What do you got?
We have potentially horrific breaking news, right along the exact lines of what we're talking about. The number 1 or number 2 pitcher, let's say number 2 pitcher in fantasy.
Oh, gosh. Ray.
Who pitches
Corbin
for the
Burns?
Yankees.
Oh, Cole? Jeez.
Is off to have an MRI on his pitching elbow right now. Aaron Boone told reporters this morning that that's what's occurring. Brian Hoach is reporting it. Obviously, he's going to be accurate with this reporting. Gerrit Cole off for an MRI on his elbow. I mean, and that's all the report is. Okay, there's no follow up. They're just strictly reporting what happens, which means no one knows what's going on exactly at this point. I am to the point. Okay. He was not recovering as well this spring, so they're checking him out. So they're spinning it this time.
He's thrown 2 innings this spring, Ray, and he got hit in those 2 innings. It was 4 hits, 3 runs, 1 strikeout, home run, no walks. Wasn't good, but it's only 2 innings. That's a guy normally at this point would be at 7 or 8 innings right now.
They're spinning it. The way it's been spun as I'm reading the comments that are coming out is that this is a shoulder. No, this is an elbow issue with him, like the shoulder was with Justin Verlander. He's having trouble recovering, more in line with how he feels in the regular season. It's been more of a challenge to bounce back. Okay, so it's not. No one at this point in time is ligament tear, surgery, long. But I was thinking about this weekend because we're doing that dynasty draft that we talked about here at the start, and I was going to take DL Hall as my second pick in that draft. We do a draft that's just the rookies and free agents, and I just said, no, I know he throws 97 miles an hour. I don't care. Like and let me just say it this way. You've got to understand everyone is a star on the hill until they're not. Gerrit Cole might be totally fine. And if you were going to choose someone to build your rotation around based upon history, he's not just at the top because of his skill set. He's at the top because he throws 180 innings every year.
Yeah.
Did it just end? I don't know. So I'm flummoxed continually as to why people build teams around pitching, Kyle.
Yeah. Well, and he was a guy, even if you don't build around pitching, he's always a temptation in the second round. Spencer Strider is probably going back into the first, but you see his name in the second round. People are striking on that. Those are, and maybe Burns moves into this class, Ray. Like, that's the question. Let's say Cole's out or we find out something. More than likely, Burns moves. Oh, he's the number 2 pitcher. I wonder if he just automatically moves into a guy that you take down in the second round. People just, he's the second best pitcher, so I got to take him early. Whereas he's the same exact pitcher that he was before the Cole news, and he's going in the third round. But people just have this mental block of, I got a good pitcher sitting there as the 6th pick in the second round. Let's take him. Whereas before this, that's Cole's spot, and Burns is 8 picks later. It's like you get rid of Cole. I wonder if Burns just moves in and kind of takes that not only same spot in the pitcher rankings, but kind of the same spot in the draft order.
I think that people look at it that way. I don't think they should look at it that way. I think that, in the case of Burns, velocity was down last year. Worst strikeout rate in 5 years last year. Worst ground ball to fly ball ratio of his entire career. Like this, there's erosion here. Now, no one cares if his whip is 1.12 and his ERA is 3.3 if he's thrown 190 innings with 212 strikeouts and 15 victories. No one cares. Mm-hmm. But, I have him in the Dynasty League we were just talking about. He's 29 now, and I'm not saying that, there's anything to panic about with Corbin Burns, but Corbin Burns does not have Gerrit Cole's high end. He just, at this point, because the strikeout piece is seemingly on the wane. So I would greatly resist the urge to do what you suggested, because I think the majority of people would view their draft in that manner, Kyle.
So again, breaking news, literally breaking news, that Gerrit Cole is headed to the MRI to check out his elbow. So I'm in a league, Ray, where I've been lucky enough to have Gerrit Cole in the squad for 4 or 5 years. It's keeper league. Keepers are due on Saturday this week, so I just hope I get the news. Because honestly, Ray, in a league like that, let's say it's bad. Just guessing. But now, Ray, we got a guy, like, I'm not going to hold him for a year where he's out. And then next year, it's like, can he come back at the age of, 32 or 33, maybe even older? You know, that decision's kind of made for me. And it's weird to say, but, you know, and some people will say, no way. If I'm keeping 4 or 5 guys, I'm still holding on to Gerrit Cole, and he'll be fine. He'll come back next year. But I think once if it is that, let Tommy John, I'll just throw it out. If it's that kind of injury, Ray, and he's out for a year, I am never protecting a guy who's going to be out for a season. I don't care if your name is Gerrit Cole or Mike Trout. You know, if you're going to miss an entire season with an injury, it's just really difficult to protect you and say, oh, I'm waiting for 15 months from now in a keeper league for this to pay off. I had
drafted. I played it this way. So let me give one scenario where you could draft him if that was the case. In my keeper league that I mentioned earlier, where I took Noel Marte, when Justin Verlander blew his arm out, I drafted Verlander in the 28th round, because in that league, you keep a guy for 3 years and it's 1 year up for cost. So I drafted him at 28, meaning I keep him 27, 26, 25. And we have 5 IL spots. So I planned to hold him, which I did. Planned to hold him on the IL all year. That's how I played it. But that's a very unique scenario. I think that, because again, in the 28th round, if he crapped out anyway, who am I drafting there? Like we're talking about earlier, Kyle Gibson. So there are scenarios, but you have to be very careful with that, because our assumption is always you have Tommy John surgery and you're fixed. You know, the numbers really say it works about 90% of the time. We don't talk about it a lot, but it's about 90% of the time that it really works, where a guy returns to his previous levels of success. And it's a long road. It's not, sometimes it's 10 months. Look at the case of Verlander. Sometimes it's 10 or 12 months. Sometimes it's 2 years. Sometimes it takes longer than we anticipate. Or Walker Buehler, who was supposed to be ready last year. Now we're still hearing this. So yeah, be very cautious with guys heading into surgery or coming back from surgery when you're in a keeper scenario.
That could be a very significant bit of news, I would suspect, by this time tomorrow. If not before, but certainly by this time tomorrow, we'll have a much better feel for where Gerrit Cole stands and what he's dealing with. So add Cole to the list of Devin Williams, Gavin Williams, Edward Cabrera, Jameson Taillon, Verlander, Gray, Giolito. It's March 11th. That's what we're dealing with right now. Oh, if Jake DeGrom could just get back on the field. While all those guys are hurt, Anthony Rendon is back. Let's
right there you go.
Anthony Rendon, Ray, he only missed a week. Back on the diamond yesterday. And as of now, we have not heard. I assume his body reacted well. He did not crumble on the playing field, which is it's a win for Anthony Rendon.
That is correct. Yes, I think it's very interesting that he is the last man standing, if you will. Of course, he's not, but it's very interesting visuals there with Anthony Rendon standing on top of the mountain, planting his flag on the moon, and everyone else behind him with their wounds and all that good stuff.
One other quick note, if you missed it, Joey Votto got a minor league deal with the Toronto Blue Jays, and I was over on Sirius, Ray, when that news kind of broke, doing a show Friday afternoon, and it's like, everybody likes Joey Votto. It's cool, and I get it going back to Toronto, Canada, but it's like, why doesn't Toronto have somebody else who can help this team? And like a 24-year-old.
Well, they were going to keep Brandon Belt, which is kind of the same, you know.
I hope it works out. I'm sure, really, Ray, all that matters is Joey Votto gets a few moments in front of the Canadians, and kids remember it forever. And if he's the last guy on your roster, I mean, at the very least, you get leadership, you know, for guys like Vlad, Bichette, you know, just kind of how to be a stud. And, you know, I don't think on the field he's got a whole lot to offer anymore. It's kind of an off the field, and maybe we'll sell a few tickets kind of move. And that's if he can beat out Dan Vogelbach. I think Vogelbach's in camp too, so he may have something to say about it.
Well, Votto, apparently, from everything I've read and heard, and I think he'd be okay starting the season in the minors if that's the decision. Like, wow. He's in it. He wants to play, and love the attitude and all of that. Like, that's a guy that wants to play. And, in opposition to Anthony Rendon cashing a check, Joey Votto's not getting any money because he wants to play. So I'm rooting for him. Like you said, I think hopefully he'll have his moments. Obviously not the player he once was, but hopefully there'll be a time or two where he helps his team out, even if he doesn't do enough to interest us in the fantasy game.
Okay, let's move to our position for this week. We're talking relief pitchers, which means we've made it through every single position over the previous 7 weeks or so. Relief pitchers will be the focus this week. We always begin our discussion by taking you through the top 12 performers of last year, which might surprise you a bit. Felix Bautista is number one. He's obviously not even available for this season. Devin Williams is 2. Alexis Diaz is 3. And yet when we talk about drafting relievers early, you never hear his name. He's early, but he's not top 3 or anything. But he was number 3 in return, $20.20. Those were the only 3 guys over $20 in terms of value: Bautista, Williams, and Diaz. Camilo Duvall was 4. David Bednar was 5. Tanner Scott was 6. Check this one out. Craig Kimbrell. Craig Kimbrell was 7. Nobody wants anything to do with him. Yeah. Scott's a later round pick. Bednar is like barely, I don't think he's in the top 10. Duvall's in there in a lot of leagues. Then you get to Clase, Romano, and Hader. I think, Ray, people would be surprised to hear that Clase, Romano, and Hader are like 8, 9, 10 on those rankings for pitchers last season.
Well, yeah, and I get that. It's another interesting scenario. Like, Clase has had 42 and 44 saves the last 2 years. And so it's very easy to say, look, he gets it done because he has. It's also very easy to say that dude blew 12 saves and lost 9 games last year. That is a horrific minus 21 for a reliever. Horrific. Okay. He also lost strikeout in the strikeout column, kind of like Corbin Burns, and he lost velocity. Like, this is not, he's
not a surefire top dude.
No,
is he? Yeah.
He's not as surefire as everyone assumes because, again, he's saved 44 games last year. I'm not saying he can't save 40 games again, but this is not the same guy. It just wasn't the same guy last year. And he's more in and he's produced this way. Don't take it out of context, but he's more in the Mariano Rivera mold than he is the Craig Kimbrell mold, right? This is a strikeout an inning. We're going to, throw some stuff that's going to get you to beat it into the ground. Okay. We're not going to come out and flame throw you down. We're not going to get 2 strikeouts every time we're out there. That's not Emmanuel Clase. And there are signs of slippage. I mean, his ground ball to fly ball ratio was, let me pull it up real quick. Last year it was 2.18, which is a really good mark. Coming into last season, it was 3.4. That's a massive. He lost 10% in his ground ball rate last year. That's a massive change. So there are signs that, 35 saves with a whip that's nowhere near the 0.73 of last year. I mean, it was 116 last season. A 1-2 whip and, 38 saves, sure. Back to dominance of 2022, not seeing it.
He's a perfect example, Ray, of why you don't like saves as a category, because he's getting drafted purely off that number. Everything else says he should not be drafted there. Right. He is a guy, and he's not a bad pitcher. I don't want people to think, oh, he's Jose Mesa at the end of his career or something. He's not. But Ray, you don't draft that guy with 44 saves as a repeat. You kind of draft that guy saying, I'm getting 32 to 35 saves, and it could be ugly in the ratios. And I think if you presented it that way to people, they wouldn't draft him, would they? If you said, hey, this is what he is, and they go, whatever you say, Ray, I'm going to believe that's what he is. And you tell them, well, Hader is a huge strikeout arm who's still going to have great ratios. Okay, I like the idea of that. If you come back and say Clase is a guy who's going to drop 10 fewer saves, that's going to go down by 25%. Right. And the ratios could be ugly. Or not ugly, but weak, average. Strikeouts, average. All of a sudden, that's an easy fade on Emmanuel Clase.
Well, he had a 28% strikeout rate 2 years ago. Last year, he wasn't even league average. His strikeout rate last year was 21%. Again, we're talking a 30% drop season over season. That's bad. That's in general, that's really scary. No one pays attention because he had the 44 saves, but he struck out less than 8 guys per 9 innings last year. Like, woof. And when you look at him, he gets all those ground balls, even though the rate, went way down. It's still 55%. So he does a good job, obviously, keeping the ball in the yard. But he's had 3 straight years with 6%, 8%, and 7% on the home run to fly ball ratio. What if that number goes up to 10%? What if it goes up to 12% and is a league average number? What happens? Then his ERA goes up half a run. Boom. Just boom. Without any, all the home run, 5 extra home runs. And his ERA last year was 3.22. Mm-hmm. So it's getting harder and harder to see this guy as a 2.5 ERA one whip kind of guy, and that's how most people are drafting him without even really looking at it.
He did lead the league in saves, 44. Holds went to a combo. Hector Neris and Yennier Cano with 31 saves. Neris, by the way, with the Cubs. So if you're in those Solds league, he's really cheap. Nobody cares about him. He's like yesterday's news, but he had an awesome year. Now, he's another dangerous living guy. So if you're signed up for Hector Neris, even in those Solds league, and I think that's his role with the Cubs. They're going to use him in the 7th and 8th inning, and they'll use him every day if they need to. So there is a payoff possible, but he could be ugly on a few occasions. Felix Bautista, number 1 in Ks per 9, 16.2. That's a pretty epic number, but again, he's hurt for the season. And then I don't even know if Ray will get this. The man who, and this is it's a bit of a, not fluky, but fluid. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a bit of a fluid standard as to which reliever had the best whip, because, you don't have guys throwing 140 innings. You have a lot of guys in the 30s, the 40s. This guy threw 85 innings last year, Ray, and his whip was .87, and his name, Tyler Horton of
Not
Detroit.
Mike Marshall.
Tyler Horton, Ray.
Yeah.
I think he made like 60 appearances, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
85 innings with a .87 whip. Now, I'm not going to draft Tyler Horton based off that, but let's at least mention him here in the preseason.
And I will admit, he popped up in a couple of the articles I wrote about pitching, in the preseason at fantasyguru.com. Again, promo code FSD20 for the discount. And I was surprised because I wasn't anticipating him popping up. And it's like, wow. And so I had to do a little bit deeper dive. And like you said,
if Lane failed, does Horton have that profile or not?
I think Foley would get the chance because Foley throws 100 miles an hour. So I still think he's down in the pecking order. But if you're in a Solds league or a Holds league, I think it's very reasonable to think the 14 number he had last season goes up. Mm-hmm. And I think, much like Clase, who we just talked about, and at the end of the day, the analysis on Horton, he overperformed last year. He'll be solid this year, but I don't think he matches the ratios from last year, to your point. But he pitched really well, and he's going to be a useful piece out of that bullpen for the Tigers. Okay, our one big question, something else we do every Monday with every new position. This is kind of an overarching one. How do you build one of these suckers? Because everybody's got a different viewpoint. Ray and I just said, top 5 guys like Josh Hader, who you see there, or Emmanuel Clase, who we were just talking about. I will be in, let's say, 15 drafts this year, leagues I'm going to play in. And Ray, I may have one of those guys in one of those leagues, if that. I don't even know. I'm pretty consistent. And my MO with the bullpen, I usually like to get 3 guys that will be in my starting lineup, roughly speaking. Now, there are leagues where standards are different and stuff, but in a traditional 12-team, 9-man staff, I tend to go with a 6-3 most weeks. Some weeks I'll do a 7-2 if if I got 2 pitching weeks, or if my relievers have 4 games that it just depends. But I like to have the option of constantly going 6-3, 6 starters, 3 relievers. So Ray, when I'm building that 3-man relief staff, I like to get usually one of the top 12 to 14. I like to get 2 of the top 20. Usually if I wait for that first reliever, I do like to get a good second reliever. Not the best second reliever, but a good one. Relatively speaking, I will draft my first 2 closers within 5 rounds of each other. And when I look at that second reliever, I have found in years past one of 2 things who I'm looking for. It's a reliever who's locked in but is on a bad team, and so nobody wants him because he's on a bad team. And I don't know. David Bednar is a great example. Now, people know about Bednar now, but last season he was kind of those guys. So I'll take a reliever that I feel like, hey, even if he struggles, he's still the guy. And maybe the team only wins 75 games, but I think I get 25 saves out of this guy. The other option is taking a reliever in a bit of a unstable situation, but he's on a really good team. And last year I took Evan Phillips everywhere. Took him everywhere. And it wasn't perfect, but it worked. I got him at a great value. I was very happy with that. Camilo Duvall 2 years ago, he was that kind of guy. I was able to even do that with him last season. And then for that third name, I like to get a big 8th inning arm. A guy who maybe for the last 2 years has been consistently good in the 8th inning. A guy who I could foresee getting 10 to 15 saves, maybe 10 saves. That'd even be fine.
a guy, Ray, like Jason Adam in Tampa Bay this year. I love getting that guy as my third dude. Big Ks, whips, ratios. His team trusts him. The guy ahead of him, I mean, we know how Tampa runs things. He could finish with 8 to 12 saves just being the normal guy. Wouldn't have to win the job, if you will. And then I'll usually get another big arm in the bench round, just to kind of have another 8th inning arm. And that's in a typical saves league, nothing to do with holds. So, Ray, that's kind of how I go about it. That's my rough plan. Is yours similar, or maybe you just can lay out kind of what you think about when you think about building your bullpen?
Well, like the screen shows, I think there's a variety of ways to do it. And I think your overarching plan is more likely than not a good way for the listener and a good way to lay out how to do it. I think that people should avoid, I'll go the other tact. I'll say, what shouldn't you do? You shouldn't be the person that takes the first closer off the board. You shouldn't draft 2 of the top 5 guys and think, oh, here are rounds 5 and 6. Here's Emmanuel Clase, Alexis Diaz. Boom. Don't do that. I agree with Kyle that being in there, and I'm looking at the rankings at fantasyguru.com, we've got 15 guys in the first 2 tiers. Great to have one of those 2 guys, and then get a guy in the early 20s, get a guy in the mid to late 20s, and there's your kind of 3 guys. I don't draft at this point because too many people do draft the opposite. So I don't draft to win the saves category. I draft hoping to finish the middle, right? So for 12 teams, let's finish in 6th. Because my thought is I can do a trade, or I can pick someone up off the waiver wire to maybe make that 6th place finish a 4th place finish. The problem is when people often do the Alexis Diaz, Emmanuel Clase thing, right? They get 2 of these guys that they feel great about. And if those guys stay healthy, they really catapult your team up the saves ranking. If one of them gets hurt, and I could have gotten Jason Adam 18 rounds later to give me the same 12 saves, guess whose team is better? My team, right? Because I took someone in the 7th round that's playing I took Alex Bregman, who's playing for me every day. So I think avoiding closers early, don't be the first one in. Don't go aggressive getting 2 top 10 guys. I think laying out the mid-level, let's not try to win the category plan is kind of where I would be too, Kyle.
And Ray, if you look at the guys who finished, top 10 in saves last year, because people fall in love with the saves category. Bednar, I don't think he was top 10 reliever off the board last year. No. Correct? I don't believe so. He finished number 2 in saves. Doval was maybe right in that range, 10 to 12. He finished number 3. Alexis Diaz was not. He finished 4. Romano was. Devin Williams was. Paul Sewald, kind of on that, but not. Yeah, more than 20. Bautista was not.
No.
Josh Hader was. Iglesias probably wasn't. People weren't too excited.
Yeah.
Carlos Esteves was not. Kenley Jansen was not. Kyle Finnegan was not. Alex Lang, Pete Fairbanks, Clay Holmes, Evan Phillips, Craig Kimball. All those guys finished top 20 in saves. And that's probably 60% of the top 20 were not considered top 15 in saves. So it's not the guys who get drafted, Hader's still going to have a lot of saves this year. Clase's probably Romano. These guys are going to have a lot of saves. But people get so caught up in that saves number, they forget what these other guys can give you in the ratios, even if they don't give you saves. Just having a ratio of 108 on your whip with an ERA of 2.9 and with a strikeout per 9 of 10.4. Those kind of things help the bottom line. They help you in 3 categories. They don't win you the category. And I guess people love the saves, right? Because 2 guys can win you the category. So you kind of go that cheap route by drafting 2 big name relievers. But it is still a very attractive game to even have just one closer you're really counting on for 30, and to even settle for 2 big 8th inning arms that can combine for 20, that if things really broke right could get you another 35 or 40 saves. I've got zero issue with looking at my bullpen after drafting going, oh, I've only got one closer. As long as my other 2 guys are dudes I believe in for the 8th inning, for strikeouts, for good ratios, sign me up. And I haven't even thrown in the cheap wins they can pick up. Getting 6 to 8 wins, that's another number, Ray. These great closers usually don't have 6 to 8 wins for the most part. What did Clase have last season? Because he blew so many saves.
3, I think.
3? Okay, so he wasn't even good. So
3.
that's another...
6 the last 2 years. 6 total.
It's another bonus rate of the 8th inning guys of usually they're more apt to get you some wins too, which everybody's after.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's about, for me, the cost that you have to pay. When we're talking about these guys being as good as the elite guys in the ratio categories and the strikeout mark, which is basically what you're talking about there. We're talking about 8 to 12 saves, to use the number you did. I'm getting that guy in the 24th round.
Yeah.
Like, who did I and again, I use the case of Alex Bregman, who might be boring to some people, but I'll take 25, 95, 95, just book it, right? I think it's the cost that you have to pay versus where you end up being, because we saw it again with Gerrit Cole, who we were talking about a few minutes ago. A little hiccup here physically, there goes that pick, right? Because these guys you're taking in the 23rd round are as good as the guys in the 7th round. They just don't have the saves total. If a guy struggles in the bullpen for 2 weeks, does the manager, we're going to give him a break, and they take him out of the closer role for 2 weeks? Mm-hmm. Does he get back in right away? Does he not get back in right away? Does this snowball? Do they start doing lefty-righty matchups? All these things go into it, where we're really paying a high premium for a guy who could give you 40 saves, could give you 30 saves. A 30 save guy could give you 22 saves. Like, Clase could pitch exactly the same as he did last year, and that 44 saves could be 33. Mm-hmm. And he pitches exactly the same. It's just the way the game scenarios worked out, and the way the manager called on him, and the way his offense performed or didn't perform, the way his defense performed or didn't perform. It's just too volatile for me. Even the best guys at the top don't consistently give you 35 plus saves every year. It's just not how it works.
And even this guy, Ray, Josh Hader, mm-hmm. It's kind of surprising Houston signed him. I don't believe this will happen, but I will not be stunned, Ray, if Houston said, you know what, the best way to use Josh Hader is to tag team him with Ryan Presley and to keep both these guys fresh and not ask them to be the guy. Some nights it'll be Hader, some nights it'll be Presley. Now, I know that sounds weird to anybody thinking Josh Hader, why would you pay him that money? But we don't exactly know what Houston's going to do with Josh Hader. Maybe they're about, hey, let's keep these guys fresh and still going strong come October. So, hey, not every save's going to Josh Hader. Like, we sit here and kind of think, yeah, if it's a 3-2 game on a Tuesday night, here comes Hader. And that may be the case. I would think that's likely the case. But you should at least understand it may not be the case. With Clase, for example, we know Cleveland is going to Clase. We know that. Jordan Romano, we know it. Devin Williams, if he's healthy, we know it. Hader, Ray, because it's a new situation, you can't just say he's the same guy. Houston may pull a rabbit out of its hat and screw us all over. I mean, there are going to be some angry people if Hader has 28 saves and Presley has 21 at the end of the year. There's very angry people if that situation develops.
I mean, they gave him $95 million under the assumption that it wouldn't be quite like that. But to your point, there were 12 guys last year that had 30 saves. Only one pitcher threw less innings than Hader. It was Raziel Iglesias, who had 2 less outs. Okay. So amongst the 12 guys that got there, Hader was basically the least used in terms of innings pitched. Are the Astros, who have Ryan Presley, who has been really, really good the last 3 years, to Kyle's point, going to push Josh Hader? I mean, Josh Hader's thrown 58, 50, and 56 innings. This dude hasn't thrown 60 innings since 2019.
And like I said, the contract is huge. You don't want to blow him out early on the contract either.
I mean, he hasn't thrown 60 innings since 2019. Clase had 75 games last year. So, yeah, that's another one. Like, Hader had 2 more saves last year than Ryan Presley, 33 to 31, right? Like, it's so, I'm not suggesting, I would anticipate Hader being as good as normal on a per game, per inning basis. But what does that look like? Is it 29 saves? Is it 56 innings where these other guys are getting 39 saves because they're throwing 72 innings? It's a legit question.
Much more on relievers coming up later in the week. Right now, let's switch to our team preview today, taking a look at a team that might have a closer situation, which we'll get to in a bit. Philadelphia Phillies are the team that we are previewing, who it almost feels like we forget how good this team is. We pay attention to the teams that go out and sign and the teams that maybe make a big splash in free agency. And Philadelphia has done their fair share, but it was kind of a quiet offseason. Their offseason was about keeping what they already have. Let's start with our player profile. Alec Bohm is the guy that we're looking at. And Ray, this was a prospect coming up. The early read on Bohm when he got here was, okay, he should hit, but my God, the defense is bad. He started to hit okay, and the defense still sucked. It started to seem like he was going to be another guy who gets booed out of Philadelphia and just, mentally crashes and burns. to his credit, Ray, he made it through to the other side. And now I don't want to call him a folk hero in Philadelphia, but this fan base was, they're Philadelphians. So, they're going to let somebody have it if he fails. Bohm was on the precipice, Ray, of failing, and he's turned it around. The glove got better. The bat got a bit better. And now we ask, okay, it feels like he's stable at third, but what can we expect moving forward? Most certainly with the bat. What do you look at when you see Alec Bohm?
He does qualify at first base too. So there's nice flexibility there. So let's at least keep that in mind in the fantasy space. It's really, you look at him, right? And he's kind of built like me, right? But he's 6'5", 220. He's a big guy. And there's always been a belief that there's a little bit more power there, but there's never really been the thought in the scouting community, this guy's going to hit 30 home runs. And so if last year's 20 home runs was a career best, it almost doubled his previous of 13. If he's hitting 18 to 22 home runs, which again, I really think that's where he is. Mm-hmm. And he's a 275 hitter, which I really think that's what he is. I mean, he's basically Justin Turner. And there's nothing wrong with that. Especially with the dual position flexibility at both corner infield positions. You see 20 home runs and 97 RBIs and you want to get really pumped, but I just really can't. I don't think there's another step to answer the question that's there. Mm-hmm. I think that, he's established himself, to Kyle's point. He's established himself and it's good.
Yeah, it's solid.
It's good. Now, is he worth the number 3 pick in the country and all that? Well, we're beyond that. This is what it is, right? It's good. He's stable. I think he's really stable. I think the ballpark, I think the lineup, and I think the familiarity with the situation is a big benefit for him. But I do struggle to a very high degree to suggest that there's another step for him to take in 2024.
And those 97 ribbies, Ray, to his credit, he's driving in guys when they're on base, and the guys ahead of him get on base. I mean, this is a good lineup that Philadelphia has. Part of being in that good lineup is good luck trying to get into the top 3 or 4. I mean, it's not going to happen for this guy unless everybody goes down with an injury.
Right.
He can't really hit himself up to a higher spot in the order, which is fine. And Ray, this is one of those things where it's almost like be happy with what you got instead of just constantly hoping for more.
Right.
It's a solid player. And I think for fantasy purposes, Ray, I don't want him as my starting third baseman or starting first baseman, but if he's my corner infielder, it's okay. Mm-hmm. If I get him in the bench, that's good. Mm-hmm. It's a guy who should play every day, unless the glove falls off a cliff again and Philadelphia starts removing him. But it seems we have overcome that. So solid, but not someone people should get excited about. You're right. 97 ribbies. When I looked at that, it is kind of surprising he got all the way to that number.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, you're totally right. The ability to move up in the order is just curtailed by the great players ahead of him. So it would take it would take a career season or injuries for him to hit triple digits this year. And that's just banking on too much for me.
Let's go to our 4 questions on this team. We'll start at the top of the lineup, Ray. Last year, you just saying it was a speed bump for Trey Turner? I mean, it was pretty ugly for 75% of the year. And then he finished with a massive kick at the tail end of the year. And it appears most everybody's given him a pass on last season.
Yeah, we talked about him late last year, right? Because we had this debate about is he going to be a first-round pick next year or whatever. And I said, yeah, I think he will be. And then to help me in that point of view, he was the greatest hitter the world's ever seen for 3 weeks, right? Like he went banana in the season. And, the numbers were still very good. Were they great? Were they up to expectations? No. I mean, the problem was he hit 266 because he was just so far in the toilet, the batting average category, he couldn't get up. The counting category numbers were basically there. I think he should get a pass, if you will. If he hit last year's levels of production and batted 289 this year, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm totally comfortable taking him as a foundational piece.
Yeah, you're all over him in the second round. Anybody should be all over him in the second round. And even at the back end of the first, it's not the worst pick. Question number 2, Ray, and this sounds weird to ask, but and I've asked this before. It's kind of fun. Is Kyle Schwarber any good? and let's pull away from like as a baseball player, but Ray as a fantasy player, again, it sounds stupid. I guess we should just admit he is, because if I just said 40, 100, and 100, like just that, Ray, people would say, God, that guy's a first 30 hitters off the board. Right? They would hear 40, 100, and 100, and they would think that's one of the top 4 rounds. That's maybe even third round, but he isn't, Ray. So do you see him? He's hitting 197 people. That was the average. And Ray, that's maddening. Should be maddening to you, I bet, as well, to see a guy who's good but is hitting 197. And I got to admit, when it comes to draft day, Ray, I just bail on him because I don't want the 197 on my team.
A lot of people saw him steal 10 bases in 2022 and thought he was going to do that again or improve upon that last year. I don't know.
Zero.
Yeah. Has anyone seen this guy on a baseball diamond? Like, he's not Mr. Svelte and Mr. Speed. That's not. I think that what I have found very interesting about this is that I don't think he's appreciably different than Joey Gallo. But the Phillies just play him every day. Gallo's had a really hard time convincing a team to play him every day, right? And there's been some injuries too. But Gallo is certainly a better all-around player. He's a fine defensive player. He's never got the chance. I think that in a different era, Kyle Schwarber would have 2 or 3 years of hitting 25 home runs, and he'd be Ken Phelps, right? There wouldn't be, because his strikeout rate is pretty big. He doesn't produce base hits. It wasn't until the last, 15, 20 years that the majority of the baseball world cared more about on-base percentage than batting average, right? So, 30 years ago, 40 years ago when we were growing up, he would have struggled to be an everyday player on a good team. Mm-hmm. So I think, bringing it back to your point, he's the Esteury Ruiz of power hitters, right? Because you're right. When you draft him, when you draft Schwarber, you have to have a batting average plan. You've got to have Yandy Diaz. You've got to have Luis Suarez. You've got to have some offsetting piece there that you have to have because he's going to sink your batting average.
Question number 3, after the big 2 in the rotation, Nola and Wheeler, who do you like, Ray? There's some options. You got Taijuan Walker, Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez. Maybe it's a wild card. Is there another guy you target in that rotation?
Christopher Sanchez has got a player profile coming out. I think it's this week. Let me pull that up. So I would say him. I think that there are legit concerns about his ability to handle lefties and righties effectively. March 14th, so later this week. Okay. He would be my call here, partly because I don't know where Taijuan Walker really is, and Ranger Suarez to me is just an innings guy. I don't think there's anything to get excited about. So I'd say Christopher Sanchez. His ADP is around 275 or something like that, so no one's reaching there. I think that we get some strikeouts there, we get a ton of ground balls there. Everything he throws keeps the ball on the ground. He does have a huge problem with home runs to right-handed batters, which is something that he needs to address. And then there's the last piece of what's the workload look like, because he's basically been a pro for 10 years and thrown 100 innings twice. But I do like his skill set overall. I'd go Christopher Sanchez.
And then finally, 9th inning. We were talking bullpen earlier. Let's talk bullpen with this team. They've had issues in the past. Last year, they made a lot of strides. Philadelphia had big arms and they were getting outs. At the top, Jose Alvarado was right there, Ray. The ERA was great, over 10 saves. Tons of strikeouts again. He's a pretty fascinating dude. I don't think anybody thinks of Jose Alvarado and says, yeah, that's a good reliever. But it's telling, Ray, this guy's got 72 saves in 7 years. He's never, though, topped 17 saves. He's never gotten to 20. He strikes out guys like crazy. He's got 12 strikeouts per 9 for his career. He's 29 years old. He's always kind of been just floating around on the periphery of bullpens. Mm-hmm. But now it sounds like he's, at least to start the year, the 9th inning guy in Philadelphia.
On the plus side for him, because he's a lefty, they have Gregory Soto and Matt Stram as left-handed pitchers. So they've got Soto to be a setup guy, Stram for more of an innings guy. So it's not like a lot of bullpens where it's like they got 2 lefties and it's like, is this guy going to close because they're going to need him for matchups? So that's a positive for him. Hoffman's got a big arm. Sir Anthony Dominguez has got a big arm. Orion Kirkering, the new youngster, has got maybe the biggest arm. They got a bunch of dudes that bring 96, right? And then they attack you. I think in the case of Alvarado, and we saw this last year too, there are bouts, much like Craig Kimbrell, his predecessor. There are bouts of time where Alvarado just, where's the strike zone? If they're committed to him, and it seems like they kind of are at this point, I think we could be seeing 20 saves out of Alvarado. Could he get to 30? Could he be Tanner Scott and get 30 saves this year? He could. But again, there's the lefty-righty thing. There's a bunch of other options. They've got younger options. They've got veteran options if he hits a speed bump at some point. So I think his ADP is about right. I think he's for our purposes of the discussion earlier, he'd be an excellent RP3. And I think as a 2, I could deal with it in some scenarios.
Well, I was just going to say he kind of fits as my 2 with how I build. It's kind of in that Evan Phillips vein of a year ago, where he's on a good team. His stats are there. He's a good pitcher. You're right. I'm not penciling him in, he's the guy all year, 30 plus saves. but I think 20 is absolutely doable. And if I get the other decent ratios, and I'm not saying he's my only guy in that realm, but as an RP2, kind of that guy can get maybe around the, I don't know, 16th to 20th reliever off the board. I think Alvarado kind of fits. It's chancy, and every year I got to take a chance on these guys with how I draft a bullpen, but he would kind of fit, roughly speaking, that characterization I gave earlier of that second reliever. New arrivals for this team. Honestly, it's Whit Merrifield, and that's it. Did you even know Whit Merrifield was with the Phillies? He is. They didn't sign anybody outside of the organization. They spent a lot of money on Nola and Wheeler. Prospect-wise, I guess Andrew Painter's still the guy, but we're not going to see him this year. It's just been really bad for the right-handed pitcher. He's still only 21, but they're going to take it easy with him. There's Justin Crawford, who's pretty good. We'll probably see him in the outfield at some point this year, but he's considered kind of a top 50, top 60 prospect. I don't think there's anything you need to draft and stash with the Phillies. How about this, Ray? Take a chance on who?
I'm going to take a chance on Christopher Sanchez. I think the price point is good. I think that, again, there's some concerns, which we'll detail in the player profile, but I think that the cost is worth investing in Christopher Sanchez at this point.
I will say Nick Castellanos, who nobody really seems to be all that excited about. I like him more than Schwarber as an overall fantasy player, even though he's not going to hit 40, even though he probably won't score 100. He could drive in 100. I think the average will be it better be much better than Schwarber. And again, all those categories can be solid. It'd be great if he could get you like 10 steals, but I don't know if that's really his game at all. But I think he's kind of forgotten as a very solid contributor. Even in Philadelphia, they got Turner, they got Real Muto, they got Harper, all these guys. Castellanos can kind of be forgotten. My pass on is Real Muto, and that's more position. I don't think he's any longer the top catcher in fantasy baseball. I don't even know if he's top 2 or 3. Age eventually gets all of these guys, and I've been out on him for a couple of years at the cost. I am still out on him at the cost.
I'm out on, and I said his name earlier, and because I look at this team and I think there's a lot of viable fantasy options. I'm going to say Ranger Suarez. You mentioned earlier a guy like Kyle Gibson. They're not the same guy, but they're in that same.
Yeah,
they're an innings guy you pick up when you need a fill in when someone gets hurt, kind of thing. People see the relief season he had years ago and they remember. I just don't think Suarez is that guy.
Looking at the clock here, Ray, you cool if we save the article for tomorrow?
Yeah, we can do that for sure.
Answered? Yeah, so we'll get to a lot more baseball, obviously, tomorrow, more on the article side from the Fantasy Guru Draft Guide, more team previews as well. I think Pittsburgh coming your way, more on relievers, all that stuff. But we have the Gerrit Cole news, so that kind of pushed everything back. If you are just joining us, Gerrit Cole, by the way, Yankees announced this morning, he is headed to get his elbow looked at via MRI. So we will see if we get any updates on Cole. Like I said, certainly by tomorrow, we hope to have something. We're going to carve out a little time for football, Ray, because there's a lot going on. Free agency starts this week. Yesterday, late last night, I think it was, or at least in the evening, Russell Wilson landed with Pittsburgh. You might recall reporting said, the Steelers aren't interested. Yeah, right. They bring in Russell Wilson. And here's the thing, Ray, for the Steelers, I love it. Like, he doesn't cost anything. This is all like contract incentives because he's making almost $40 million with the Broncos this year. So he wasn't even playing hardball. He just wanted a place where he could start. And if Russell will, here's the thing, Ray. Russell Wilson was not Russell Wilson last year, but he wasn't like a terrible, oh God, we can't do anything with this quarterback. And I don't think he's going to be good in Pittsburgh, but for this team, Ray, with what they're trying to do, he may be just what the doctor ordered. I will tell you this, you feel a lot better about him than you do Kenny Pickett right now under center. At least I do. So from that perspective, no risk. It's a one-year deal. Why not do it if you're the Steelers?
100%. Like 1.2 million is the number we're hearing because he's getting 38 million from the Broncos. I think it was, you consider and say Mason Rudolph, you consider and say Kenny Pickett, but let's be honest, they're not. No, Russell Wilson is better. Okay, where is he? Is he a star? Is he? I don't know. I know that he was effective last year. I think it's very reasonable to think he'll be effective this year with the Steelers. There are weapons there, both in the backfield and at the wide receiver spot. He's got Freiermuth at the tight end. They're not going to throw the ball 39 times a game, right? They're going to play a game very much like the Broncos, of course, that they're going to try to, 50-50 it between the run and the pass game. But this is obviously an improvement for the offense. And we've laughed. Like they tried so hard to make us all believe in Kenny Pickett. He's not. Kenny Pickett's going the way of Mac Jones. It's just how it is.
So obviously the Russell Wilson days are done in Denver. Also done in Denver is Jerry Jeudy, traded to Cleveland, Ray. I think it was a 5th and 6th round pick. Probably as a strong number 2 to Amari Cooper. And remember, Cleveland did this with Cooper. They kind of got him on the cheap from Dallas. And they're kind of doing it again with Jeudy. I don't know if Jeudy was a lot more hype and excitement than he ever deserved, but Ray, they gave him a lot of opportunities and it just didn't work in Denver. I'm not getting excited about this move, but he's obviously still draftable. If he had stayed in Denver with like Stidham or whomever, I'd be like, he's a guy, Ray, who needed a new start, a fresh start in a new spot. And hey, here's Cleveland giving Deshaun Watson weapons. I mean, they're trying to make this easier for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, they've got obviously Cooper and Jeudy. They've got David Njoku, who really emerged last season. They're hopeful to have Nick Chubb back at some point mid-season, maybe early in the year from his knee injury. They've got weapons. And, I think this is obviously a good move for the team now. It puts Elijah Moore as that third piece. I know people overly excited about him this year, but he's a third receiver. Okay, let's get him where he needs to be. This is a negative in one respect. Someone we're really high at fantasyguru.com, Chris Tillman, or Cedric Tillman, excuse me. Thought I was thinking baseball. Cedric Tillman is buried now. And I don't know if they would consider trading him. I mean, he looks the part. There were flashes last year when he was given an opportunity. They've certainly pushed that back with Jerry Jeudy. And to your point, Jeudy will have no more excuses. This is it, right? You get your chance now to prove it. If you produce, you'll get that contract you want. But his career to date has been a huge disappointment.
Elsewhere, the Buccaneers continue to run it back. They signed Mike Evans to a big deal. They gave Baker Mayfield 3 years, $100 million. So there you go again. You got a pulse. You can be an NFL quarterback and make over $30 million. Good for Baker Mayfield, I guess. Mac Jones was traded to Jacksonville purely as a backup. You hope. Trevor Lawrence. Free agency. It sounded more like, Ray, we are getting a lot of smoke on Kirk Cousins to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Like, this sounds like it's happening, and that's going to leave Minnesota in scramble mode. And Ray, speaking of, if you're Justin Jefferson, you out. I mean, asking for a trade, moving on. He's been wanting a contract. He hasn't gotten it. Now he's going to be working, who knows, at quarterback. I could see that guy wanting out as a wide receiver if Cousins leaves.
Well, David, I think this kind of plays into this. David P. is asking, what are the Bears going to get for Fields and where does he go? I mean, would Jefferson be stoked if the Vikings made a move to get? I don't know. Would they make that trade? Would the Bears and Vikings trade? I don't know. I mean,
well, the cost, and this is how quickly it changes. You got to remember he's coming up on the 5th year, so he could be a free agent. It's like a 4th or 5th round pick for Fields. It's not crazy. It's not it's not like you're giving up a 1st round pick for the guy who was, what was he, number 4 or something a few years back. I mean, it doesn't cost much if you want to take a shot on Fields.
Yeah, all of the Fields to Atlanta stuff, obviously, that seems like it was just nothingness. I don't know what the Vikings are going to do because, the Vikings don't have an answer if Kirk Cousins leaves. Mullins, Hall, Dobbs, these guys aren't the answer. They've tried them all this year. They're not the answer. They're going to go, if this happens, the Minnesota's going to run to Justin Jefferson and say, here's $112 million or whatever. And he's going to say, no, I mean, he's going to, so yeah, it's that all of a sudden that franchise hit a crossroads really quickly, right? After having all that success they had in 2022.
Well, also like the idea, I think you're right. Like Fields in Minnesota, that kind of, but would the Bears even do it?
Would they? I don't know. Yeah,
I don't think they would. Speaking of wide receivers who might want to trade, T. Higgins supposedly wants one. He was franchise tagged by the Bengals. That means $22 million. And these guys want long-term. They want the stability. He's not getting it, right? It's a lot of money for this year, but maybe he's also a little bit tired of being second banana to Chase, but hey, sorry, dude. That's just the way it is. Burrow's going to get his money. Chase is going to get his money. I mean, Joe Mixon's going through the same thing. There's really no money for Joe Mixon. He's a running back too. Higgins, Ray, he's just never going to top Jamar Chase. He's always going to be number 2 to Jamar Chase.
Yeah, and part of the problems with Higgins is he also has had problems staying on the field. There's been a lot of games where he's played short amounts. There's been games he's missed, that all factors in here. I get it. You're an NFL football player. Higgins blows his knee out and can't run anymore. He's gone. He gets I totally get it. But it's $22 million for a team that has an opportunity to have a lot of success this year. So we'll see. He can push all he wants for a deal. They have no incentive because no one's going to make a trade for T. Higgins, not knowing if they can sign him to a long-term deal. So he's got that same Justin Fields thing. Like, you got to find a team that's willing to trade for him, willing to take on that risk. And even if they're willing to do the deal and take on the risk, if they're paying him $100 million, what kind of trade are they going to offer the Bengals if they feel like I got to jump all this money into a guy? So he's in a tough spot right now.
Couple of other things on the way out the door. Patriots re-up with Kendrick Bourne, 3 years. I think he's coming off an ACL, so we'll have to see his status for next year. Sounds like the Chargers are open to the idea of flipping Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, so the Jim Harbaugh era kind of takes off with that being a possibility. Houston, maybe not sold on Devin Singletary in their backfield, which is kind of weird. What more could you ask from Devin Singletary last season? Pittsburgh released Allen Robinson, so that will not be a weapon that Russell Wilson will have next year. And for what it's worth, the Chiefs extending Chris Jones, 5-year contract for Chris Jones on their defensive line. And more of this is coming. Trades, free agency, all of that later in the week. But that is where we stand on this Monday. Okay, Ray, as promised, there was a lot to get to today. An hour and 15 minutes worth of things to get to today. Crazy stuff.
And one other bit of information. Aaron Judge is not going to play the next couple of days because he's in spring beat-up mode. Yankees having fun today, aren't they, Kyle? Yeah.
Gerrit Cole to the MRI machine and Aaron Judge missing a few days, which here, Ray, if nothing were going on with Aaron Judge, okay, whatever. But we do have that toe, and you just wonder, is this the toe barking, And they don't want to say that because if it's barking with this lack of work in spring training, it's like, how in the hell are we getting through the season with this? So they're not going to say that. And they certainly don't want to piggyback it on top of the Gerrit Cole news.
Yeah. The franchise is burning.
Go on StubHub right now. Yankee season tickets dropping by the second. Okay. Whew. Deep breath. Back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern. Ray and I having more fun with relievers, probably more fun with baseball, probably more news on NFL free agency and guys who aren't happy with $22 million and being on a competitive team with a very good quarterback. Let me out. It happens. Hey, everybody gets a choice, and that is the choice they are making. Ray, great stuff, man. Good to talk as always. We'll do it on Tuesday.
Looking forward to it, Cal.
And a big thanks to everybody who has joined us, whether live or maybe you're down the podcast. Always enjoy it. Back tomorrow with more of Fantasy Sports Daily at and powered by fantasyguru.com.